loud. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Holyoke School Committee meeting. Today is September 23rd, 2024, and we are starting on time, 6 p.m. Roll call, please, Miss Feliciano.
Mayor Garcia,
Here.
LaFave,
Here.
Ms. Tinsley Williams,
Present.
Dr. Rivera Colon,
Here.
Mr. Wilhan,
Here.
Mr. Collmore, Ms. Wilson.
Here.
We're missing one more.
Oh, Mr. Sheehan, sorry.
Present.
Excuse me.
All rise for the Pledge of
Go.
Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, Republic of one nation, under God,
All right, just going over this one rule that we read each time. And so on March 29th, 2023, Governor Healy signed into law an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, which, among other things, extends the expiration of the provisions pertaining to the open meeting law to March 31st, 2025. Specifically, this extension allows public bodies to continue holding meetings remotely without a quorum of the public body physically present at a meeting location, and to provide adequate alternative access to remote meetings. The act does not make any new changes to the open meeting law other than extending the expiration date of the temporary provisions regarding remote meetings from March 31st, 2023 to March 31st, 2025. Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20, I am hereby informing all attendees that a video and audio recording is being made of the meeting, and the meeting is being live streamed and run live on the city's community TV channel. This evening, moving on to agenda item 2, student showcase. We don't have any this evening. We're going to start in October. Ms. Feliciano, did anybody submit for public comment?
No.
Okay, great. Moving on to communications and reports, student reports. I don't see anyone from Holyoke High School North Campus, but are they on Zoom?
Hold on a second. Evan is trying to just resend him the
Yeah, I
link.
know Evan was trying to get on. We can come back to that. We're just gonna continue going. When he's fully on, just like give me like a heads up or something. So moving on to superintendent's communications. I don't have anything. Is there anything that you needed to share, Mr. Soto?
No, I shared an update as I shared an update last week with the school committee on some of the questions that had come up in the last meeting, and I think that you wanted to have that on the agenda just in case you had a question.
We're gonna move that into October's meeting. Yep. For vice chair report, I have nothing to report this evening. Moving on to new business. Alternate delegate to the annual MASC conference for November 2024. Reason that this was put on the agenda is because the alternate was Dr. Caballero Roca. Is there a motion to appoint another person, Mr. Sheehan?
I'll appoint Dr. Rivera Colon.
All right, any discussion? So everybody remember, our delegate is Miss Wilson. This is for the alternate. So we don't have anybody on Zoom right now because it's just Mr. Collmore. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Great, motion passes. Congratulations, Dr. Rivera Colon. Next is updates of committees.
Move to table.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Ongoing business, policy revision. We have policy BA, school committee operational goal, BAA, evaluation of school committee operational procedures, BB, school committee legal status, BBAA, school committee member authority. Remember, these are the ones that we already put in the recommendations, were posted for feedback, came back, there's no feedback. So is there a motion to vote to recommend that the superintendent receiver adopt said policies?
I'd like to make a motion to take as a package.
Okay.
Second that.
Well, the motion is for all of them.
Sure.
The way the motion was written, says adopt said policies, BA, BAA,
Sorry,
BB,
thank you.
as revised. So
Great.
are you sticking with the motion?
I'm gonna stay with motion, thank
Okay.
you.
And we have a second by Ms.
Yes.
Tensley Williams. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, motion passes. So, Mr. Superintendent Receiver, our hope is that you adopt said policies as revised. Moving on to ongoing business. B, ward vacancy appointment, as everybody
Move
received
to receive.
in front of their table.
Yes.
So we have a motion, move to receive. The
Second.
legal opinion, we have a second by Ms. Wilson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, passes. Now, process of filling ward vacancy position. Actually, it was also written in this legal opinion, but I know that we had talked about for Miss McGee, Brenna Murphy. Sorry, I'm not sure if it's
Leary.
still Brenna.
It's Murphy Leary.
Murphy Leary. My apologies. The city clerk, did she provide her input, Mayor, or?
Solicitors connected with her, but just so you're aware, and Devin pointed it out to me earlier today, was the actual appointing is done by the city clerk, not the chair of the committee. But yeah, so I did meet with the city clerk. We went over the opinion, and she's on the same page and happy to do the vote accordingly. In the opinion, if you haven't read it, the question was asked. We're appointing two people. If the first person is appointed, can that person engage? In an opinion, it says yes, that person should be sworn in immediately. In the opinion, it says the mayor swears the person in, but to my understanding, that's not accurate. But whatever the case, that person will get sworn in and participate in the voting for the next candidate.
Okay, great. So we all know what the process is going to be. And I think what's important is that for the city council, for us to let them know at the beginning of the meeting how the process is going to go as per the legal opinion. Ms. Wilson.
So my only question is, do we do it by numerical order of the ward? Because we know the process of swearing one in, but do we flip a coin as to which person we vote for? We receive information about and then vote. I'm just wondering because we have the process of swearing them in, but
I mean, there's various ways that it can be done. It could also be done who submitted the resignation first. So Ward 4 technically submitted their resignation first. Or we could put both numbers in a hat and pull from the hat and see which ward is going to go up first.
Resignation ideas.
So
Go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
I like it based upon who resigned first. I feel that's an appropriate manner, and I like that suggestion, and I feel that we should go with that.
So is that a motion that we're going to?
Yes, I would like to make
So
the
the
motion that
process.
we process during the joint meeting based upon who resigned first, so that would be Ward 4 first.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Sheehan. Is there any discussion?
So I would
Mayor?
suggest, Madam Vice Chair, that you connect with the council president prior to the start of that meeting and make sure you two are on the same page when describing the ground rules.
Will do. And what we'll also do is that once me and her talk, then obviously we're going to let everybody know at that given point how the process is going to be, so that as well those in the audience. The only thing that I'm foreseeing is that at this moment, the candidates will at that time, after you pick your Ward 4, is when they're going to be provided with the resume and the letter of intent of your Ward 1 positions. So they're going to have to read fast. Mr. Sheehan.
You know, public document, can't we just give it to anyone who applied and say you can take
Correct.
Only to the Ward 4, because we wouldn't do it to the Ward 1. I mean,
Why couldn't we swear the Ward 1 in immediately after they? Oh,
Ms. Wilson?
why can't we swear the Ward 1 in after they're voted in so that they're ready to go? I'm just wondering. I'm just not sure if the city council's having an immediate meeting thereafter. I know we're not going to have any action to take, but then they'll be sworn in and ready to move forward as
No.
a member.
Well, what I was talking about was Ward 4, so that then they can vote to appoint the next one.
Okay.
So they would have to have access to the Ward 1 applicants, whoever gets chosen from Ward 4, because once they're appointed, they're
I
gonna,
understand you
know,
now. Thank you. I was
So
disconnected, so I
It's okay.
apologize.
guess we'll just figure that all out.
Children.
Or speed reading. Mayor?
So just for folks at home, the other question that was asked by this body at our last meeting was if whether or not the folks being appointed into the ward seats had to live in the ward, and the legal opinion is yes, you have to live in the ward. So we can't vote to appoint folks to represent a ward that they don't live in.
Thank you. All right. So with all that said and done, we're moving on to, he wasn't able to log in to the.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, but you didn't do the vote.
Right, we were in discussion for the motion. I'll tell you. Yep.
I'm sorry. Can somebody please tell me what the motion is?
to receive the leave.
We did that one already.
The process during
You
the
were very
joint.
quick with it, and
No, we
that
didn't
was
vote. That
Yep.
was a discussion.
We were in discussion.
okay. Hold on a minute. We went through section B, which was ward vacancy appointment, and it was to vote to receive the legal opinion. Mr. Sheehan immediately moved the motion to receive the legal opinion. Then we went into section C after that vote, which is process of filling ward vacancy position. That's when I said, it's also kind of written in here. And then that's where we started discussing it. I know that you put in a motion, Miss Wilson, that
Who was going to go first?
who's going to go first, and we said Ward 4 would go first because it would be based on the resignation date. Is that the one that we didn't do the vote yet on? We just kept discussing? Ms. Feliciano, did we do a full vote of that one?
No, you did not.
Okay. So going on that motion where the first candidate to be appointed would be from Ward 4 based on the time of the resignation being submitted, okay? So that was Ms. Wilson, seconded by, was it Ms. Williams or was it Mr. Sheehan?
I believe it was Mr. Sheehan.
Mr. Sheehan. Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so motion passes. Now, we'll move right into our MASC training on budget process, including the development of guidelines and priorities. And I'm being told that we are not being broadcasted. Can we check into that?
What? Gotta
Make a motion to take a 5-minute recess and reconvene at 6:20.
I have a
Second.
motion with a second. We're gonna take a 5-minute recess. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. 6:15 p.m. We're taking a recess. We should return in 6:20.
So Anthony,
5, 4, 3, 2. Good evening, and we're back again. Roll call, please, Miss Feliciano.
Mayor Garcia,
Here.
Ms. LaFave,
Here.
Mr. Sheehan,
Present.
Ms. Tinsley Williams,
Present.
Dr. Rivera Colon,
Here.
Mr. Wellahan,
Here.
Mr. Collmore, Ms. Wilson.
Here.
Great. Excellent. So moving on, I'd like to welcome the Executive Director for the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, Glenn Kuchar, as well as our previous assistant to the school committee, and our current field director,
Yes.
Liz LaFond. We're happy to have her back. So we're moving on, as I mentioned before we went into our moment of recess. We're moving on to the MASC training budget process, including the development of guidelines and priorities. So I pass over the microphone to MASC.
That happened.
All have copies. And I did bring extras. Will be shown to you through a screen share that Irene is going to pull up. Some of you may recognize the format, but see a lot of different information from what you have seen before. And please feel free to interrupt. Okay.
Bless you again.
We go. Okay. And how do we change slides? Okay. Get it there. Screen. Get a screen share up. I attribute this as payback all the friends I abused for being nerds who grew up to be computer people and made these things difficult to understand. But screen share. He's doing it. You do screen share? Sorry, I can't hear you.
So while you guys are trying to do that, I'm going to ask Mr. Wellahan to provide an update to his finance committee meeting that he had, because I know you guys went over some things that were part of the draft plan or the capacity building plan. Mr. Wellahan?
Thank you. Yeah, we met at the finance and operations committee met on September 16th.
I'm going to have Mr. Wellahan just give his update
Yeah.
because this is part of what we're going to be discussing. Go ahead.
We had a full meeting. Our finance director was there. He sort of led us through the agenda. I know we just talked about setting up future meetings. We talked about a calendar moving forward. So we're going to try to have 2 meetings per month, probably till the end of the year. Specific questions just on the remaining money to be spent for ESSER funding. Talked about fixing boilers, just kind of the hands-on approach of where the money's going. I know we had some decent spending for playgrounds, windows at McMahon, windows at Donahue, that type of stuff. So it was a positive meeting. Again, we talked about just the overall budget presentation, how we want to. We're kind of looking for some guidance tonight from Glenn on just how to work at the warrants.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Soto?
Yeah, thank you for the update. I just wanted to also name that we did look at a list of any grants and gifts that were received since the last meeting, and we reviewed any contracts, or we also provided a list of any large contracts that were greater than $100,000, which was one of the commitments that we had made in terms of involving the school committee more around finances. Those were 2 big things that happened that night, in addition to looking at the full budget process calendar for the upcoming school year.
Thank you. Hey, Mr. Kuchar.
Okay, thank you very much. Being a school committee member comes as a surprise to a lot of people when they learn their roles and responsibilities. Among them are some serious responsibilities related to budget. You all know the basic responsibilities: making policy, hiring the superintendent, supervising and evaluating the superintendent, engaging in formulating the budget and monitoring the budget as the year goes on, and being the employer of record for collective bargaining. But there's the legal citation for those of you who need it, but trust me, it's there. I do want to say before I continue, superintendent provided me with this document, which is your budget. This is an exemplary document. A lot of the things that you see here reflect some of the things that good boards are supposed to do, but which boards do not always do. And some of our boards have had very bad media days because they've found out that they've overexpent their budget, that they approved collective bargaining agreements that they couldn't afford in the first place, and that other cost factors, people were not paying attention to the budget, superintendent wasn't following the budget, the business manager wasn't acting on the budget. You're very fortunate, and don't look for trouble where no trouble exists. It's, and I think you will find this as fine a document for the budget as you will find in most districts. So, we have a series of steps here. You appoint the superintendent, and you confirm the appointment of the school business officer. Very important reason why. The school committee, as the elected body by the, well, to be the elected body elected by the people in a representative democracy, has a fiduciary responsibility over finances. Your job is to watch the money and do the things necessary to make sure that the money is spent well, used well, and invested appropriately. And the business officer is the person who largely has that responsibility with the superintendent. Hence, you appoint the business officer.
Glenn, I have a quick question.
Yes.
So when we're talking about the confirming of the appointment of school business officer, now, I'm thinking about when we get back local control, right? At this moment, we have Sean, right? Sean. And then when you have, whether it's an interim superintendent, whatever, that first day, we would have to confirm the appointment of the school business officer.
It depends on whether or not the business officer has a contract. If the business officer has a contract, the school committee will be required to approve subsequent contracts.
Okay.
So if your business officer has a 3-year contract and it's year 1, the business officer has 2 years left in the contract.
So we would just confirm the remaining years of that contract.
Really?
No?
Co-
What?
Got a contract, and that contract,
I'm talking about when we exit receivership, because now it becomes the appointed by the state right now.
Right.
You. So then, when we do exit, whenever that may be, it's as if we would have to then confirm that yes, we're going to continue with his current contract. However,
no. The
Oh,
reason
then
it's
what?
called the
You
reason
said
it's called a
subsequent.
contract
Oh.
is so that it can't be broken. So you stay for
Okay.
the rest of the contract,
He stays for the rest.
and then you will have the option of renewing the contract or relying on the superintendent to make another recommendation and going in a
Okay.
different direction.
Okay.
It is
You have to
very
remember, just with the receiver has the authority of, so every decision over the past year has
Right.
been school committee.
Correct.
So every policy that's been approved, everything automatically becomes, like, it's the school committee with their authority has worked in that action. That one of the, nothing changes unless you change it, or with personnel contracts, it's dealt with contract.
part of the fiduciary responsibility is that you monitor revenue and spending, that you have a spending plan, that the money is put in the specific places so that you know where it is, so that you can assure that things are accurate. And at some point during the year, if it becomes necessary to move money around, the school committee will have the authority to define how that money is moved around. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, your budget process is also full of policy. And the school committee approves policies, some of which are related to the budget, some of which are not. So budget and policy go hand in hand. But it's also important that school committee members understand the elements of school finance. Now, You don't need to be terrified by this because school finance is arithmetic. It's not calculus, it's not trigonometry, it's arithmetic. So you can understand it if people take the time to explain it to you, and if you take the time during the budget process to be very thoughtful about it. And as you can see, school committee sets the they do a number of things related to the budget, but first thing that is important about the budget is that you set your goals upon which the superintendent can base his goals, and where the school district can develop a set of goals that they're going to use. And then you need to make sure that your budget provides the financing to achieve those goals by putting the money in strategically. Good question.
Mr. Wellhand. Oh, okay. Miss Tensley Williams.
You said if the money needs to be moved around, school committee has the authority to do that, or we need to know why it's being moved
Well,
around, who's doing it?
Here's how it works. Your budget has been placed into specific accounts, and the school committee will then tell the superintendent, here are the cost centers that we want to monitor. Now, I served on the school committee in Cambridge a long, long time ago. We had 8 to 10 cost centers. Administration, teachers, specialists, paraprofessionals, consultants, fuel and equipment, transportation, et cetera, et cetera. We put the money into those large buckets, and if those buckets need to be emptied and put somewhere else, the school committee must approve those mid-year adjustments, providing they've told the superintendent, this is how we want to be notified, and this is what we want to see. If we have a mild winter, you may have money left over in your fuel account. And the superintendent may come back to you and say, we've got extra money in the fuel account. I would like to transfer it to supplies and equipment so we can buy more supplies now. We don't have to buy them later. In some cases, they need to create extra positions. In other cases, personnel leave the district and their jobs aren't replaced. So sometimes there's money left over. And the school committee has the authority to create the line items and monitor them and approve any changes.
Thank
The day-to-day operations of how the school works, by the way, as you know, are in the hands of the superintendent. And the superintendent really has an ethical responsibility to follow the guidance of the school committee so that they can put the money where it goes. I'll give you an example. One of our districts put $60,000 in the middle school budget specifically to cultivate athletic opportunities for females, because the school committee wanted to create more opportunities for females to play at the high school level. Therefore, they wanted to create a farm system where kids would learn the sports in grades 6, 7, and 8, so that they'd have a program into which more kids could work. And that was a assigned line item with language put in the budget saying this is where it goes, so everybody knew that was where it was supposed to go. That's a very simple explanation for how some of that works.
Mr. Wellhand.
Thank you. Yeah, we've talked about the transfer process. We're looking to probably establish a guideline or rules on how much money for a transfer has to come back to the full board for approval. We don't want to really bog down the school administration with minor transfer approvals, $1,000, $2,000. So we're probably looking to have a threshold of some sort. So
In the interest of efficiency, you don't want to approve every $35
that's
transfer.
my point. Yeah, that's our point.
Usually those cost centers are very big numbers.
Okay. I know one of the strengths for the committee, first of all, we changed the name of our committee. It's Finance and operations. So we're more in tune with the spending that's going on for the physical bricks and mortar for the school. So we're more in tune with that. Long range planning, talked about that with Mr. Soto and our finance director, having a long-term plan involved. We know that the money from the Student Opportunity Act, that's not always going to be there. We know the money from the federal government isn't always going to be there for us. So we're looking to have a plan. Some of the neighboring districts around here seem like they've been taking ESSER money, one-time revenue, and they've been using that to fill gaps within their budget, which is sort of not good going forward. So this finance committee isn't, we're kind of not going that route. I was reading an article on the city of Brockton. They had a $14 million budget deficit. And I know like the school committee was chastised on that for not being in tune with the budget, not having a sense of where the money is going. I think there were some people lost their jobs. The finance director lost her job. I think the superintendent lost his job. I think he was a veteran superintendent. And I know on his way out the door, he said, "I'm not really a numbers guy." Well, we got a numbers guy right here, okay, Mr. Soto. So for a district that's in receivership, so-called, we seem to have our act together, as opposed to some of the neighboring suburbs and the bigger cities. Thank you.
I agree with you. You're in a pretty good place. Among the things you want to be thinking about as you plan a budget, what are you going to do with your programs? The federal money has largely been exhausted. People have collective bargaining agreements to fund. There is the matter of inflation. And some of our districts are getting an infusion of new students who are migrating in that we weren't expecting. All of those things can eat away at the budget. And they're very difficult to plan for. Remember, your school budget year runs from July to June. So your fiscal year ends in June. Your budget has to be sent over to the municipal side. At some point, they've got to make it an approval before the end of June at the latest. But the state rarely has a budget done by the end of June. And the federal government fiscal year doesn't start until October 1st. So anybody who can figure out how to do a multi-year strategic financial plan that is accurate will be nominated for a Nobel Prize. It's just, it's a very, very challenging job, and we don't envy the people that need to do it. It's a risk to it. Also means that the school committee has to make some very difficult decisions. Do you raise class size to save positions, or do you with the other way, lower class size and do away with some of the other positions? Yes, it's the running battle that we see in many of our K-8 systems, where you protect the music, art, drama, and dance teachers, and lower and raise class size, or do you lower class size and eliminate some of the other positions? Do you eliminate those positions in their entirety, or do you leave a kernel of it left? For example, if you offered music 3 times a week, stop offering music, or do you cut it back to 1 time a week and lay a teacher off? There are very hard decisions to make, and the school committee makes those decisions often with the people who are affected sitting right here in the audience watching you and mentioning to you that they all voted for you because everybody voted for you. And are you with me or are you against me? So depending upon whether you're the classroom teacher or the music teacher, you think the superintendent is terrible or the superintendent's a genius, depending upon what the recommendation is made. It's what makes budgeting very difficult. So now let's just get a quick look at First of all, where the money comes from. If you notice here, one more click on that. Massachusetts spends about $19 billion on its public schools. Aided. And the bulk of the money, as the blue section reflects, comes from property taxes locally. The green segment is the Chapter 70 aid that the state gives to you. And then the purple, well, actually, it's purple on your paper and it's green on the slide, light green. I don't know why that is. That sliver is from various other sources that come to you. I want to say something about the other sources. There's no question that whatever Chapter 70 money you get and whatever you raise from local property taxes comes directly to the city of Holyoke, and you can spend them appropriately as you need them. The federal money is a little different. Sometimes it's a general appropriation and sometimes it's very specific. For example, Title I is a good chunk of where that third quadrant, it's not a quadrant, the third sliver comes from. There's the Department of Agriculture that provides money for schools. There's special education money, all kinds of other things that come in. Now, here's a very important question. Some of our most astute business managers are able to balance the local appropriations and the state grants with the federal money or other grant money that comes in so that you can integrate that appropriately and legally and make it all work. It's a real skill. But I will tell you, because I'm old enough to remember, back in 1980, Proposition 2.5 meant that we in Cambridge had to lay off a third of our teachers because property taxes were dramatically slashed. There were a few people that we had in our district who were very much, they'd always show up to be seen. Whenever there was a meeting, they would be there. If a school committee member was visiting a school, one or two of them would make it a point to walk by so that you knew they were there. But I never quite knew what they did. And when Proposition 2.5 came, they didn't leave. Like a half a dozen of them. So I said to our business manager, his name was Oliver Brown, he's sort of a legend among business managers. Ollie, why are those people still here? I had to sit in this room and lay off 250 teachers, many of whom were my friends and neighbors. And here are these people from the central office, nobody knows what they do. And the business manager said, we put them on Title I, and we don't give you the federal money. We don't have to tell the school committee about the federal money. It's not important. Well, that's a very short part of a much longer and much funnier story, which we're not going to get to. But I would just say to you that that was the last time Cambridge stopped holding back the information on federal money with the school committee. And just say to you, it's very, very important that you have a good strategic discussion with the financial people so that you know all of the money that's coming in so that it can be used skillfully. Especially if you lose some of the special funding that you may be getting in receivership and end up in the same fix as everybody else. So that's the three main sources of money that come to you. Now you have some influence over your local property taxes if in fact you need an override vote from Proposition 2.5 limits. You may be able to work with your assessors and figure out how to increase your base and get something from that. You can certainly lobby your legislators for more money in Chapter 70. And I'm going to explain the Chapter 70 formula to you in a way that I think you'll be able to understand so that you can see Chapter 70 is actually simple in some respects, but very complicated in others. Working a computer is complicated, but knowing how the computer works is extra complicated. And Chapter 70 is such. So let's take a look at what the I don't know. Try another click and see what. Well, you've got the handout in front of you if you're not able to make sense of that, but go back. Let's take a look at the arrows, and I'll read to you what the arrows are supposed to say. Starting in the summer, your superintendent was probably talking to everybody about what needs to happen in fiscal year 2026, because 2025 has already been well planned. Superintendent is likely to talk to the municipal side of government. What are we thinking about? Talk to the school committee. What are our goals? What are we going to need to do? Figure out whether you have a collective bargaining agreement that needs to be funded. And think about all the things that that might be the year when you want to do an elementary foreign language program, or where you might want to start if the state doesn't come through with 100% funding to make sure that everybody gets preschool. You might want to create some alternative special education program, new stuff, whatever it might be. That's the time to tell the superintendent, so that the superintendent can then work with the business manager to propose to you a budget that will try to achieve your goals. Now, that would be wonderful if it was prior to Proposition 2.5, and the school committee could appropriate whatever it wanted, and the city had to come up with it. It was much easier then, but now it isn't. So the superintendent has to use his best judgment in sharing with the school committee, here's what I think the budget should look like. Now, I would ask you this. There are school committees where the entire committee acts as a committee of the whole to deal with the budget questions. There are other school committees where the school committee appoints a minority of members to be the budget committee. It's very important that you pay attention to how that's structured, because the superintendent then has the power of the initiative. He put something out and said, here is my recommendation. And that has instant credibility because it's coming from the superintendent. The school committee members may wish to say, okay, but we want to make some adjustments. And we're doing it in the budget committee. Say if there are 4 of you in the budget committee. Well, it's very hard for the school committee to make changes that are the result of consensus between the superintendent and the budget committee. So frequently, it's a committee of the whole with all members of the school committee included that start working on the budget itself. I don't know how you plan on doing that, but it's an important decision that you need to make. So once that's done, and it comes to the school committee will hold a public hearing and allow the community to come and speak to you on that issue. It's a very important public meeting. It needs to be advertised. The law requires at least one, so that people can come up before you. And things changed a little bit with COVID. We don't have as many people coming out at night to meetings as they used to, but with all the questions that go into a budget, most school districts would have every special interest in town talking to you about, don't cut the music program, don't cut the drama program. We need a renovated elementary school. We need to keep this program. We need to keep that program. And you know that every one of your parents, with all respect to the wonderful people in Holyoke, are single issue constituents. It's their child that means the most to them. And the most difficult decisions to make are the ones that affect your family, your children, your home, your job, your neighborhood. And people are not objective about how they attend to protecting those particular assets. So it makes it difficult. Well, once the school committee has set the budget and told the superintendent how you want to monitor the budget, then the superintendent will send the budget over to the mayor and the city council. They have some limited abilities to make alterations, but there is a required minimum level of spending that the school committee needs to come up with. And then your fiscal year begins on July 1st, after the city council sends it back and the mayor sends it back approved. Now, I'm going to make a quick statement here. The total budget that is composed of state funding is, school district is
90+%.
how much?
About 91, 92%.
No. How much? Dollars.
What was the question again? Sorry.
What's the annual budget of the Holyoke Public Schools?
I'd say it's
General-
in the
a
90s.
general
I have it right here, so we don't need to be general. It's about $128 million.
Okay.
But yes, that includes all in. It's about 128.
So the
million.
city council and the mayor send you back $128 million.
Well, he takes a lot of it back towards city services, but we don't need to get into that.
Okay.
That's false.
You can adjust that budget during the year and move money around.
Right.
You just can't spend more than is allowed. So if it's $128 million and you want to move $500,000 from here to here, you can do that by yourselves as the school committee, but can't give yourself an extra $1 million. Say there it is.
Ms.
Sorry,
Hensley
Hannah.
Williams?
Once the school budget is set, the committee can, we do that, and we send it over to the mayor and the superintendent for them to okay it or not to.
Once you finish your work with the budget, it goes to the mayor and then to the city council,
Yeah,
Oh,
so
Mayor.
and then ultimately comes back to the mayor for approval, for signature.
right. So once the council approves the budget, that's what it is.
That's what it is.
But there's not because what is it? We do net school spending. So there isn't any on the local side that we add a supplement above the Chapter 70 funds. So there isn't anything we can touch in the budget that the school board approved. But instead, we have control over what transportation.
Transportation, adult ed, and leases over 3 years.
That's really where a lot of the council side of the discussion goes. But you're right; they approve the dollar amount, and then it gets signed.
Mr. Sheehan?
I just want to be clear, we do not, and never have, been able to develop a budget that we send to the city council and to the mayor with our needs. We are given a number to work towards, and that's what we have to work towards. But we cannot create a budget that exceeds 100%, because we're only going to get funded at 100. So I don't want people to think that we are sending something to the council that we think is necessarily adequate, appropriate, or equitable for our district. We are given a number, and we work towards that number and have to make it work.
Now, the fact that your budget is legally adequate doesn't mean that it's really adequate.
Right.
Talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
Just in terms of the state budget process, so you might know where your intervention can be most helpful. The governor will propose a budget in January. The House of Representatives is usually working on the state budget at some point in April. The Senate gets the budget in from the House in May. In several of the past years, the governor and the Senate leadership have agreed on how much money is going to be available. as a consensus revenue figure to the extent that they're able to come up with something that may be accurate. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it ends up not to be. Then the legislature will develop a consensus budget through the conference committee, and the conference committee report goes to the governor. The governor signs it, and you now have your budget. And I'm going to explain some of that to you. So the challenge for the school committee, which you can see here, is to sort of strike the balance of meeting the needs that the superintendent and staff have identified and meeting the objectives of your goals and to make sure that the money is spent appropriately. It's a very challenging task. We recommend that school districts get quarterly reports, preferably quarterly reports. I will tell you, Plymouth has 10 school buildings. In other words, the administration building and elementary school, there are 10 buildings. Each one of those buildings has 10 cost centers. Anytime one of those cost centers, one of those 100 cost centers gets changed, they bring it to the school committee for its approval. They like it and it seems to work. But it's sort of like the Quaker meeting, no one leaves until we've reached consensus. And the reason you're able to reach consensus is the culture is we want to reach consensus. So it works for them. Might not work for you. So whatever is specific to you is what you want to look at. Now, if we can go a little bit ahead, and go to the next one if you could. Okay. In order to monitor your budget, you not only review quarterly reports, some districts have monthly reports, but most districts have quarterly reports, and they seem to be the plan of choice. The people's money cannot be spent without the approval of the people's representatives. And those approvals are passed on to you through the warrants. Every bill that the school district pays is paid through a warrant. And each warrant needs to be signed by the school committee or its designee. And that would be, raise your hand because you're
No.
the designee.
Go ahead, finish first.
Okay. Or the designee. Now, you get a pile of warrants over the course of a year, it's going to be this high. You can't possibly read everything that's on a warrant. Payroll's a little bit different because you scan that and one person could always sign the payroll warrant because you never don't want payroll paid on payday. You want to see 1,000 people go from Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. Don't have the checks ready on the end of the month. But the warrants are important. You have the right to expect that the superintendent or the superintendent's agent, the business manager, is putting something in front of you that is truthful and accurate. But we do recommend that whoever has the authority to sign the warrants give them a quick check, make sure that they look reasonable, and make sure that if you have questions, you ask them. There are no inappropriate questions when it comes to asking about the warrants. And there is that, very, very famous episode of a school committee member who came to the meeting with handouts for a major event that this member was involved with and said to the superintendent, I'd like to make 50 copies of this on the Xerox machine. And the secretary said, we don't have a Xerox machine. And he said, I signed a warrant. We spent $25,000 for a copy machine. To make a long story short, $575,000 worth of equipment was faux purchased from a fake company using the tax ID numbers of the superintendent's wife's social security account. So that superintendent became a guest of the Commonwealth. But that was exposed
But that's-
because members of the school committee were reading the warrants and saying, this doesn't look right. I know we used to question a lot of things that we would see. Do we really need that many consultants? Do we really need that many people? Do we really need all this equipment? Why are we buying this now? I thought we bought this last year. Ask questions. That was the problem in our other community. People weren't asking questions. So we encourage you. You don't want to read about yourselves in your local newspaper as being accused of having a budget deficit because you didn't pay attention to the budget.
Go ahead, Ms. Wilson.
A question that came up in our finance and
Operation.
thank you operations was, can we review the warrants electronically?
Can you review them?
Can we review them and sign them electronically so we don't need to actually go physically to the business office? We're wondering, is there any issue with doing that?
I think you can put an electronic signature as long as you have in good faith reviewed the document.
Okay. Yeah, because this is a, we do have, it's interesting, we don't have policy DGA for authorized signatures as a district currently, and that's something that we were looking at creating, and that the electronic signatures came up at our last subcommittee meeting.
Mr. Wellahan? Okay, so here's where I have a question on. So you were just talking about policy, right? About authorized signatures. I'm looking at the MASC updated, revised, new policies from MASC, not from ours. Because I was wondering too, where is for signing of the warrants? When I read our policies, it's just like very just bland. And then to me, I think of policies and procedures are like together. In my world, it's together. Like, this is the policy, this is the procedures to make sure that you meet whatever it is that you said the policy's on. So I was looking just now at some of the things that have been updated for Section D, and we're going back to 2021 from MASC, thanks to Mr. Sheehan directing me to where to look. And this is stuff that we never even adopted here. So there's things that have been done, but when we look at like the warrants, this is something, again, that's part of our capacity building plan. It is under September where we're revising and begin implementing protocol for reviewing warrants and payroll. Today's date is September 23rd. Obviously, we ain't going to meet that. And so one of my concerns is that these are things that we should already be looking at versus now it's, well, we got to refer here, and then that's got to go here, and then there, and by the time you know it, when is this going to happen? Policy, procedure, does that kind of combine, or are we saying that this is the policy, it's just a general statement, a general policy, and now you as the superintendent receiver develop the procedure for it, or whomever develops a procedure. So if somebody
There's a whole school of thought about how much procedure goes into policy. Policy is clear. Sometimes procedure is left out of policy and left to the superintendent, except for those procedures which are, by their nature, so important that they rise to the level of policy. We're seeing that, for example, on in some of the Title IX. The feds have put out 1,600 pages of procedures and instructions. We generally would not put procedures in the policy document, but some of those procedures relate to alleged offender and their right to confront their alleged victim. Now, that is a major issue that we believe is so important and of such great interest that it rises to the level of policy. In that case, even some of our lawyers have agreed that sometimes a procedure does also become policy. Mostly, it does not. And that is the kind of detail, actually, that the authors of the Education Reform Act wanted to relieve the school committee of having to worry about.
I just look at it as it's based for accountability purpose.
Mhm.
If you don't do right, so it's the school committee develops their goals, whatever. You have to have a measure to hold one accountable for what they said they were going to do. And I know the mayor had mentioned also a specific threshold. I don't know how many months ago that was, but here we are. And again, are we going to do it? Are we not going to do it? Is just going to be is it just going to be like at some point if it's a high cost? Is because it's all general. It's very generalized, and so I don't know. To me, I think sometimes we need that guidance where it's specific, so that nobody veers to the right because it's beneficial for them, or veers to the left because it's
And-
beneficial for someone else.
And it's up to you to decide how much procedure you want to put into policy. Now, in the office, we've had some real arguments about whether a procedure should go into policy or whether it should be left out. And sometimes I feel like I'm working for them instead of them working for me, but that's a whole other story.
But to your point, though, it all comes down to what the culture is and the preference, so that that'll work. That'll keep up with the day to day that the superintendent needs to keep up with its obligation. It's the systems we create that work for all of us, that accommodate the goal of, you know what I mean. So I think we're gonna have to build that as we go. But it's hard to say like what
It's not to
policy we want to
micromanage
adopt
either.
right now. And it's tough because it's true. Like, I mean, I have that with the council today. Certain things, procedure versus policy. What is a proper policy versus what's the word I'm looking for? Have strong oversight. Micromanage it. You know what I mean?
Micromanaging.
And those are things that we gotta talk about as a body and come up with the decisions.
Miss Wilson?
We do have DGA ready to be reviewed by the full school committee. We do have it that any finance subcommittee member can sign any warrant in the absence of an available committee member. The vice chair or chair of the school committee can review and approve. That's our language, and that record of the approval will be made on the next regular school committee agenda. So just so you know that is, we can put that on the next agenda, DGA.
So my question would be, does it specify like
It doesn't.
when someone will sign? Like it'll be once a month?
No, it has to be done on a weekly basis.
Is it on there?
The discussion is no. The discussion is being had at the subcommittee level as to, with guidance from our business officer, as to how often. It's definitely not once a month. We would not be able to work. People would not want to do business with us if we were only signing and making payments once a month. I believe it would be on a weekly basis, and we would be doing that.
So
So
is
that
that
would-
something that we're going to put in the policy?
No, it
then
would not
as the
be.
time frame of when it should be done, or just by saying minimally once a week or once every 2 weeks, whatever the case is.
I think it's micromanaging again with the procedure. I think we just say who signs. And I think that it's just, the policy refers to authorized signatures. It doesn't, it's the title of the policy is authorized signatures. It's not warrants. It's not warrant signatures. It's just saying that who are we authorizing to sign these warrants? Not the procedure of how they're being, when and how. It's just who are we authorizing?
Mr. Sheehan?
So It's valid points that Ms. LaFave brings up, but I also know that we've contracted with MASC to do this policy work and be done by June, according to the plan that we approved with DESI. So, I know what each month says for deliverables, but I also know that when we approved that with DESI, that if work was ongoing and being done, there could be some alterations of those deliverables that are on there. So it also, yes, I know that these policies are coming out, but if you're also starting the review process with MASC, like, you also don't want to do work twice. And I will say just with that policy, and I'll bring it up at the next meeting, but I don't think the mayor should be a double signature on warrants. So they probably shouldn't be signing school committee ones when they sign them all again at City Hall. Because that kind of eliminates the check and balance of the school committee signing it if the chair is able to sign twice to approve them. But I just think, like, some of this stuff, like, yes, it has to get done, but it's also like the state knows that we're also contracting with someone, and I think it's set. Contract set?
Yeah, I can follow up on the procurement process of it, but I know that the funding has been identified.
Is there a contract? Like, has anything been signed? Like, there's a bunch of people who sign contracts in this room, so is anything signed?
Not. Yeah. Okay. Going through the signature process.
What's the name of the contract?
Who? What's the extra work? But like,
Who'd
who
you
put,
hear from?
Yeah, who put this on?
We can start scheduling those meetings. I'm sure that my executive director would say we can start scheduling those meetings and going ahead with reviewing some policy while Anthony's figuring out where that contract is.
But I guess, like, who, like, what is this what is it?
I don't know what it is.
This
I
board
asked
is like,
Who would you talk to?
Amanda.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, we were emailing, to be fair, and I did leave her a voicemail, but
I think there could be confusion about earlier conversation about the community advisory board and a consultant. Maybe that's what Amanda's thinking about, but I can follow up.
yeah, because that would have to be a separate contract
That,
anyway.
that
right?
would be
Yeah.
separate, yeah.
Just for your information, we've given you a path that items go before they become warrants and get paid. It involves requisitions and running things through the principals and going through the business office, and a fourth step for the head of the business department, and then a purchase order is issued and leads to an invoice, and a purchase order is then sent out, and the check is paid. This is a standard process for how things happen. For those people who don't get behind the curtain a lot in the business office, that's a standard practice for doing purchase. Depending upon the community that you're in, purchase orders are executed expeditiously, or they take 6 months. And I've never really had a full explanation of why it happened, but it was a big problem for us in my city. Seemed to be any way we were able to deal with it except to ultimately pay the bills. Now, this repeats what we have already said. Stuff about warrants, what's on the warrant, and who gets to sign it. So we covered that. Also, on the quarterly reports, we've covered this set of items, which reminds you that we recommend quarterly budget statements, and that you set guidelines for when transfers need to be brought before. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. You're moving money from cost center to cost center. So if you're moving money from fuel for the Jones School, Smith School, that's not a controversial item. If you're moving money from fuel to personnel, That's cost center to cost center. And that's where the school committee probably wants to get involved. I just so that you know, we at MASC put the word micromanagement on probation because oftentimes it's a bullying term used to get school committee members to stop asking questions. You're micromanaging me, you're micromanaging me. So we put that and the word ROBUST. That word is on probation too. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you. Now, we're not on television. I can.
We're on Zoom.
Are there people at home? Oh, five. Okay. We'll have to figure out some way to make. I used to live next door to a neurosurgical resident who operated out of the Mass General. And I said to him one day, Andy, if something's not as complicated as we think it is, we say it's not brain surgery. What do you brain surgeons say? And he said, well, we say it's not rocket science. So we actually have had two people who actually worked for NASA on school committees in Massachusetts. And I asked one of them, who was in the North Andover School Committee, what do you say? And he said, we say it's not the Chapter 70 funding formula. But let me explain the foundation budget for the city of Holyoke. And this is the latest, so it's going to be the fiscal year in which we are now present. You notice this is a big grid. And along the top of the grid, you see 14 columns. Each of the 14 columns represents a grade level where a student may be. So you can see from this chart is how many preschoolers are there in Holyoke? Can you see that number on the top column? 344? Okay, you have 344 preschoolers. You have 401 full-day kindergartners, 2,085 elementary school students, 1,328 middle school students, and so on. You also have 400 vocational students. Now, work with me on just columns 1 through 7. Along the left side of the page, you have 11 different areas of expense that a district might incur. You might say cost centers. And you notice that lines 1 through 11 are loaded with numbers. So let's try to find out what it costs for the city of Holyoke to educate with its administration. The administrative costs are broken up into a per pupil expenditure. Some demographer, some CPA locked themselves in a room and they came up with the average per pupil cost for every student classification and every expense. So look at line 3, column 6. Do you see $7,039,146? That means that the cost of providing classroom teachers and specialists for those high school kids comes up to about 7,039,000 students. And how do you get that number? You divide 1,464 high school students. So you take you take 1,464 students, multiply it by the average per pupil cost, and you get 7,039,000. If you want to know what the average per pupil cost is, divide 7,039,000 by 1,464. Now, I'm not saying that these numbers are perfectly accurate and correct, but they are the numbers that we use because the law says that these are adequate. And as you can see, for every grade level, that classification, and every expense line, we have the costs that are estimated by multiplying by the average per pupil cost. Now, columns 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 are bonus columns because those are students who fall into more than one category. So as you can see, you have 227 special education students served in district, 53 students served out of district. You have 411 English language learners at the lower grades, 190 English language learners at the upper grades, 314 English language learners in Voc Tech, and 4,764 students who are economically disadvantaged. Well, we have average per pupil costs for them too. And if you multiply all the numbers, the bottom line total of all of it together, you see it in yellow on the bottom, 114,374,878. That's your foundation budget for Holyoke. The number down here. Okay, it's basically a big grid. You can, if you wanted to go to the Department of Education, you could download the spreadsheet and you could play with the numbers, just to show what would happen if you had more or less. Okay, so you see that that is deemed to be adequate. Now, if you would pick up the chart for Weymouth, the reason I pick Weymouth is that they have almost the same number of students that you do. But the average per pupil cost, you see the number on the bottom here, it's 92,545,802. That's their foundation budget. And their average per pupil cost underneath there is 15,747. Okay? Now, why is the foundation budget for Weymouth so much lower than the foundation budget for Holyoke? Well, look at the difference in numbers of economically disadvantaged kids. In Weymouth, it's maybe 45%. In Holyoke, it's more like 82%. So the more economically disadvantaged children you have, the higher your foundation budget will be. Sometimes the districts that have more migrants coming in and out will have a higher foundation budget. I will tell you the special education numbers are not real. They are assumed to be about 4% in district and 1% out of district, because that was apparently the only way they could calculate it. So now you understand that based on this chart, Holyoke has a tougher burden to bear in terms of paying for its students. Let's figure out exactly how they determine that. Go to page 2 for Holyoke. And if you would look at the column, whoops, actually, you need to go to page 3 for Holyoke. I do, bear with me. Okay, here we are. Page 3 for Holyoke. Let's look at the indicators of wealth. Look at over here on the left. You see that total equalized valuation of property in Holyoke for the last year that we have data was $2,572,000. And the total income earned by the residents of Holyoke was $843,705 in yellow. You see it? Line 4?
Yeah.
843,705?
Yep.
Okay. So you see there's about $2.5 billion of real estate and $843,000 earned in income. Now pick up the same page from Weymouth.
Million, not thousand.
I'm sorry. 2,572. 2,572,000,000. I'm sorry.
Yep.
All right, but basically 2.6 billion. Now compare that with Weymouth. What's their total property valuation that they can get revenue from? It's about 10,600,000,000. And how much money is earned by all the residents of Wayland who pay income taxes? 2.5 billion compared to 843. So you can see that Holyoke is going to need more state aid than Weymouth. Well, let's find out exactly how much more Holyoke gets. And if you could, you want to go to the page that says Chapter 70 summary. I have red arrows here. You see that Holyoke gets $29.9 million in Chapter 70 aid. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm looking at Weymouth.
I wish we were getting
Brain lapse here. Okay. So Holyoke gets 101,191 in state aid. See the red arrow? And basically 80.66% of its budget will come from the state. And in Weymouth, only 17% of their budget comes from the state. Why? Because they don't need it as much. Now, do you think the people in Weymouth think this is fair? No. Every community feels it gets screwed in comparison with its contiguous neighbors. I can tell you people in Cambridge think that Somerville gets everything and we don't get anything. Waltham has this argument with Lexington. Springfield probably, well, East Longmeadow has this with Longmeadow. Holyoke and maybe Chicopee fight over this question. Whatever it is, but it's a very interesting system that they came up with to figure out a fair way to give you state aid. On the other hand, of course, they feel that they're making 80% of the payments. They should make 80% of the rules. We say the golden rule, whoever has the gold makes the rules. So this is going to change when Holyoke becomes its own governing body. I don't know that the numbers will change until the economy turns around and people build a stronger Holyoke as we go forward in the future. But that is when you hear Chapter 70 being debated in the legislature, there are all kinds of different proposals. We had one proposal 2 years ago. A legislator offered a specific amendment, and wouldn't you know that who gets a 10% increase in Chapter 70? That person's district. Who gets a 10% loss in their district? Another legislator's district. So we have argued that the best way to resolve all of this is to put a good inflation indicator for everybody, and to not only do that, but to put more money in the pot so everybody gets more. One other very important source of revenue that we'll talk very briefly about is the special education circuit breaker that generates a lot of money for you. It's an equal opportunity program because everybody has kids with special needs, and the circuit breaker is fully funded. So everybody gets circuit breaker money, and we've advocated for that, and people really turn out for that. So the two best strategies, let's look at a new, in maybe an increase in Chapter 70, more money per pupil, for example, which sort of corrupts the system, not corrupts it, but makes the system a little less technically correct, but it does provide more. And I can tell you, I was elected to my school committee 50 years ago. In 50 years, there are three consistent themes that I can tell you about. First of all, the Red Sox never had enough pitching. All right? Teacher morale has never been as low. And there was never enough money in Chapter 70. And I don't know that this, I think if we drop back in here 50 years from now, we'll see the same thing. So that is the Reader's Digest version of the foundation budget. We could talk about this for like 5 hours, and then it becomes physics. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Glenn. That's all really good information, and we share a lot of that in our budget document. And I just want to lift an important point that school committee member Sheehan made, is that everything that we just talked about is just the foundation budget, but which is often your minimum net school spending requirement. But communities like Weymouth actually spend more than just the foundation budget. They spend almost 10% above the net school funding requirement. And, you know, to say the fair and adequate is, you know, it's kind of a stretch. I understand that it's, you know, that's just the way that we're being funded through this formula. But as an example, we only get in our general fund budget about $2 million for out of district tuition, but our costs in out of district tuition is closer to over $12 million, which is probably much different. And I think another point that I want to make is that these enrollment numbers also include charter enrollment. So we spend about $17 million on, 17 million of this funding goes to, gets passed right on to charter schools. I don't know what Weymouth's, charter school enrollment is or availability, but I just think as we look at this foundation budget, those are some really important factors to think about when you're thinking about a town like Weymouth and a town like Holyoke.
It's a very important point to remember that the charter takes the average per pupil expenditure, not the foundation budget average. So if you live in a district that spends 25% above foundation, the charter school takes 125% of your money. And there are 3 communities in Massachusetts, Cambridge being one of them, that gets no Chapter 70 money because it all is taken and given to charter schools. So charter school reform, another subject for another time, but I think it's something worth looking at. So we pretty much touched on all of the things that we wanted to get to in the basic budget presentation. You will see that some of the charts that we have here will show you the growth of foundation budgeting. The foundation budget by law cannot grow by more than 4.5% a year. So after we've had a couple of years of inflation before things drop down, the foundation budget did not grow as fast as the economy did. And that's explained to you. You can look at those at your own convenience. Occasionally, the state plays with the definition of who's economically disadvantaged. So, for example, if you are eligible for a federal anti-poverty program, you are automatically eligible, and the town got more money. On the other hand, if the federal government cut out the program and people lost eligibility, they would no longer be in that column, so you'd get less. All of these things play into it, and I would suggest you maintain close contact with us. We send out regular notices on all of this stuff as it comes by. But the basic things that I wanted to make sure we left you with tonight are your fiduciary responsibilities, your, I think, responsibility to continue to follow the kind of guidance that gives you and your community a clear expectation of what you have, and to fight extra hard for the money that you need to provide the services that you must. Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Wellhand?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. Yeah, just to kind of filter back on some of the formulas you're talking about. I know the finance director does provide the finance committee with a call it a bi-monthly finance update, and that's the update report by cost center. So we do receive those. Yeah, twice. Yeah. Okay, so we are keeping track of what's been coming up. I know the Student Opportunity Act has assisted gateway cities like Holyoke in terms of the funding to make sure we're getting our fair share. That being the case, you know, the data says that we're one of the poorest communities in the state. And I know just the wealthier communities can afford to fund their educational system beyond the foundation budget. So that's some of the inadequacies of the system. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Mayor Garcia?
Not necessarily a question, but just wanted to highlight what Glenn was talking about much earlier in his presentation regarding decisions and pressure that school bodies are going to get from anybody and everybody that's advocating for their interests. And hopefully it's solely parents that are looking out for the interests of their child. One pressure that we will get, and there's no buffer. It's not like on the city side where everyone can blame the mayor. The council can blame the mayor. They can only cut. They can't add to the budget, and it's a budget that I present. We have a process, and I think that's what Glenn was alluding to. You want to have a clear guideline and process that helps conclude a presented budget, so that you might not like it, but folks at least appreciate how you got to it, and it helps de-escalate as much as possible. We do that, but on this side, it's 13, 14 members, 7, 8, 9, 10 members, 10 members here that get to decide how to move money around and how to put that where we want to commit funds to. And there is, we do have unions that will pressure us individually, that one community across the Commonwealth where teachers went on strike, there will be that level of pressure where we have to make sure that whatever we vote on, and folks can vote either way, that it's not going to break that dollar amount threshold of the budget and take away the need to keep up with what we think is needed, even though it's never adequate. It's never adequate. But certainly, the narrative can be very different in the public eye if we're not careful and strategic and transparent and proactive with how we finalize the final budget, whatever that agreement is. So that is control. There's no, can't say it's the receiver anymore, put the blame on the superintendent. We'll be in that driver's seat deciding on how we want to get to a final version of the budget and move forward with decisions. There will be a lot of pressure, but we just have to make sure that we have a clear and transparent, proactive process to help navigate the system so that we can alleviate that as much as possible.
Mr. Sheehan?
So will you let the committee prepare a budget of what it needs rather than a budget that meets your number that you give us?
Well, I think from the last time I was on the school board and you were here a long time ago too, the finance committee was very busy working with the business manager and superintendent, kind of doing that line item by line item. When it comes to the school budget,
No, but what I'm asking is, will you let the committee develop a budget that meets the district's needs, or are we still gonna have to develop a budget that's based off a number that you hand us?
it's gonna be, I think it's gonna be off the number.
Okay, so then we don't then we don't have all of this power because it's still the city giving us a number and saying, make it all work. Instead of presenting a budget to the city council and balancing the budget with the needs of the school district.
Well, currently, I don't think it's the district, and mark me if I'm wrong, so it'll like kind of tell us more or less what you think that number's gonna be as far as,
The state gives us a number, and then like historically in Holyoke,
Right.
anything above that number is not entertained by.
Right, so will that be entertained by the mayor's office to submit that to their budget to the city council, a number above 100%?
no, only because I know it'll be cut.
Okay,
That's the only
so
reason
we,
why.
but we can't talk about how we have all of this control when we are still given a number that isn't presented to the city
No,
council.
I know, but what I'm saying is when a union is looking for a 10% raise, and we have to somehow, it's the schools members are going to vote the way they want to vote. Like even if there is control and the mayor says, "Hey, we can't exceed this," we can still. This body it's the vote of the body, and that's the number. I don't think I have the power to. I think that district voted number has to get brought forward in front of the council. No.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, we're handed a number. We're just being told, we've been told for years and years and years that don't exceed 100%. What I'm asking is, can we? And will you present that to the council as part of the budget? Will you present a budget to the council of the needs of the Hoyok Public Schools? Or will you present a budget to the council
That's
that
this question.
meets
I wonder
100%?
if can I cut a budget? So if the school, because the school district presents a budget, can I cut it?
I think
I don't think
what
I can.
Mr. Sheehan is expressing is like, can we submit a budget that is above net school spending that we believe meets the needs of the community, and have the city council vote on that? And I think historically the answer to that question has been no. It has to be the minimum net school spending requirement because the community can't afford it. Means cutting services in other city departments. I mean, I don't. Did I articulate
Yeah.
that?
But what I'm saying is that, right, although, do you really have to, right? Can the school committee, regardless of what we say, hey, don't exceed this, if the school board voted on a budget that's much higher than what I'm recommending and saying, I mean, the district vote is the vote, right? Is it not? I mean, obviously, we never
then
want to
it
be
gets
there,
into
but
the point where then the city council would be in a
Point of
position to
order.
cut down.
Are we following parliamentary procedures, or are we allowed just to speak whenever we desire? Question.
So
I'm just
right-
wondering.
So what I am going to say is
No, I think we're
he was
following
asking
procedure.
a question to the mayor as to can we present that budget? The mayor's explaining to him. So actually he's asking him a question. I can't answer that question.
No, I understand that, but then
So-
the mayor then asked someone else. So I'm just wondering,
Because
is
he's
that
clarifying.
okay?
Well,
I'm
technically,
just asking for
Anthony was
clarification.
clarifying because I guess it wasn't understood as to the presentation of the budget. I think I'm kind of understanding who we want at the end to say that you're going to have to cut it. So instead of it looking bad on the school committee, let it look bad on the city side. Let them cut us. Go ahead.
So I guess the question at hand is, over the past numerous years, we have not developed a budget based upon our student needs to fulfill the needs of our student body, which is at the forefront of everything we do as a school committee. We are student focused. we've been asked to develop a budget based upon a number that's given. What I'm hearing is that we potentially would like to fulfill our obligation and develop a budget that is based upon our student need and present that to the city council. I'm wondering, why would we not be able to do that? If we are charged with, when we have the ability to develop a budget, wouldn't we develop a budget that's based upon our student needs?
So can I just hold on? So part of this whole capacity building plan is for the school committee to take hold and kind of take responsibility for what our responsibilities are, which one of them is fiduciary responsibility, right? Okay. Obviously, when we're making decisions, the decisions that we're supposed to be making should be student-based, student-focused. Go ahead, develop that budget. Who's saying that you can't? Okay, so they give you a number. They decide that no, you got to cut. Okay, now you got to go back to it, and you're going to have to figure it out. But now you were directed to cut it because they're not going to meet the needs of the students. But it wasn't to say that the school committee didn't
We didn't
address or identify
the
what the needs are, and this is what it's going to cost in order to meet those needs. Mr. Sheehan?
Not exactly what I was asking. So
Okay.
when the budget is created by the mayor presents it to the city council. And the city council then can cut anything they want. They can't add from the budget. And they have that window from when he presents it until June. What I'm asking is, if the school committee presents a budget to the mayor, will the mayor present in his budget and balance his budget that he presents to the city council with the number that we need, rather than the number that we have always been told we have to hit? That's my ask, is like, will a budget get, because in the end, we can pass anything, but the mayor is the one that puts the budget together for the city of Holyoke. So if we ask for 150 million and he only puts in 100 million, then there's obviously a disconnect with that. If 100 million is 100%, and throwing fake numbers for anyone that watches afterwards with that. But so I'm asking is, can we build a budget, and will the mayor present a budget from the school department that reflects what the school committee feels the needs are?
Right.
That's my question.
So, Mr.
I don't.
Mayor, that's
I don't
not
know.
you.
Can I answer it? I don't want to.
You don't have to answer it right at this moment. You can think about it, and I mean, this process is a long process. But we have, for probably 50 years, the city of Holyoke has functioned off an ability.
Yep.
And Liz can probably correct me if, depending on how long it was, that she has 40 years of history that the city of Holyoke has handed the school department a number and said, figure it out. Whereas we know that we can figure it out and say, this is the needs.
And I think that's what it is. I'm just
I,
debating in my mind if, even though that's what it is that really what it is? You know what I mean? So and this is worst case scenario. I know that we all for many years have been working together and figuring it out and making sure that things are balanced or whatnot. But you know, it's good to know. It'd be good to know, like, what if, right? If can I cut? Am I supposed to take what the district gives me and bring it to the council?
I mean, so long as it's 100%, do whatever you want. Create the budget, just like you create the budget for the Board of Health. And it's all in your budget. Everything else is figured out by, I mean, for us, under that, the council figures out all the other city departments and do their thing. But for us, it's all, we figure out, like, when you look in the city budget, I mean, I haven't looked at this year's, but it's usually just school department, like, it says net school spending, non-net school, like, you don't get all the line items from the school department, you just get usually 4 numbers
Right.
that are listed there.
Yep.
Ms. Tensley Williams.
Mr. Soto, is there a way that this could honestly be worked out between us, you, and the mayor, and we come up with a real figure that we can use? Because otherwise it's going to be changed. It's not going to come up, like, say we come up with a figure, then it's knocked out of the box. Can we come up with a real figure that maybe once in 50 years we could say, okay, can that be done?
We can propose you know, we can talk about proposing anything to as part of the budget process. I just, at the end of the day, I think the mayor then has to
Have the last-
present a balanced budget to the city council. And if they are going, if he is going to do that, that means, you know, cutting other city services. So like I can't sit here and tell you how realistic that is. That's not, you know, and I wouldn't want to be in his shoes, right? Like that's, you know,
Right.
to have to decide, you know, cutting other city departments to fund the school department above net school spending. I would absolutely love that, but
So that's
you're
what we
asking-
would have to do then. That's what you think. Okay. Okay, just being real. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Sheehan? Oh, Mr. Wellahan, I'm sorry, I
Thank you.
didn't.
Well, she's. Yeah, I mean, we have the minimums, but the city has the minimums too, on how much revenue they can raise year to year. So we're in the same predicament as a city. Okay, we're talking about one pot, but the city has one pot too, because they can only raise revenue through certain mechanisms without debt exclusion or override. So it's still one pot. And again, the mayor's budget has to go to the city council for approval too. So you can't leave out that that part of it. Thank you.
Mr. Sheehan? Okay. I know that I'm going back to our capacity building plan, and in August 2024, we were supposed to decide whether we were going to assign representatives to observe collective bargaining negotiations. Obviously, we didn't succeed at completing that task. So I'm looking at the policy for negotiation. I don't know how to proceed with this. Like, what are we going to wait for MASC? Well, now for it to get approved or whatever, and then they get to that section. I mean, there's going to have to be a lot of changes then to the capacity building plan, and I can see us just prolonging this whole process to where it's not going to be a school year plan.
Off of that, you brought it up and it does capacity building. I will make a motion to refer the collective bargaining issue of the capacity building plan to the leadership subcommittee to come up with a recommendation.
So that's to go to the leadership and accountability.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So section H, negotiations. There's a motion to.
No, that's not what my motion was to
School committee
send
negotiation.
the collective bargaining point of the capacity building plan
Oh,
to,
okay.
and they
to
can
them.
figure out a plan. It wasn't
Okay.
it wasn't anything
No,
with the policy.
nothing with
was-
policy. It's going to have to do
policy.
with
Yep.
the plan. You guys are going to discuss that on whether you're going to observe.
No,
Assign.
we'll come up with a recommendation for the committee. That was the motion.
Okay. Did you write that motion?
The motion was to send to the leadership and accountability subcommittee the issue of collective bargaining representation from the capacity building plan. And I made the motion, and Jay seconded
Jay
it.
seconded it?
Yep.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, well, thank you, Glenn. Thank you,
Thank
Liz.
you.
We're gonna see you October 15th for the superintendent evaluation
To adjourn.
process.
Second it.
October 15th.
Second it.
It's in your book. It's in your calendar. Okay, we got a motion seconded with seeing no, you know what? All those in favor, aye.
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 Meeting adjourned, 8 o'clock PM. Have a good night.